Hello? Rabbi, is everyone here?
Everybody.
Yeah,
Oh,
the phone is here.
Shalom Aleichem.
I'm sure.
Shalom.
Oh,
Hello? Okay. Good evening to the parrots. How are you?
Okay. I have a lesson in gravity on Shabbos.
You had what?
A lesson in gravity on Shabbos.
Oy vey. Sounds like you fell.
Yeah. So,
We're a poor shlema. It's
Thank
crazy. Ani ha'ir es asher teves, ani Hashem reifecho. Okay, so Rabbi say we're going to take a look at some of the halachas of Chodosh, as well as we're moving closer to like Boimer, and now we're starting the Svida tag. After Pesach, talk a little about the minhagim of Svida time. Anyone who wants can ask a question. I see everyone's muted, but if you want, you can unmute yourself, and we can have a discussion. So Lamaisa, we know that there are many times people are advertised that this is Kemach Yoshon, that their product is Kemach Yoshon. What does that mean? I one time, a certain Baal Tshuva I was friendly with, he told me that he never knew what it was. He thought it had something to do with bugs. So he one time asked someone in the restaurant. He asked someone the mashgiach if the soup is Kemach Yoshon. So it's important to know what we're talking about. There is a halacha in the mitzvah sasem in HaTorah. There's an isser lois asa v'lechem v'koli v'karma lois soichol ad etzem hayom hazeh. One is not allowed to eat any of the wheat that has grown before the second day of Pesach, before the carbon ha'omer is brought on the second day of Pesach. All of that wheat, that crop from the previous year till the previous Tezai and Nissen is Aser. It's called Chodosh, the new crop, until the second day of Pesach. After the carbon ha'omer is brought, then even on that very day itself, during the times of the Beis HaMikdash, after they brought the carbon ha'omer, they were allowed to partake of that crop of that year that grew. And that crop is now termed as Yashon, old wheat, old grain, and anything that grew after that Tazayim Nissen, till the next year Tazayim Nissen, was considered Chodosh. And today that we don't have a carbon, so we wait the entire day till the entire day goes by. We don't have the carbon, so we can't have a carbon which is matir. So it's the etzem hayom hazeh, the very day itself of Tezai Nissen has to go by, and after that time, all the wheat that grew since last year, Pesach, is now mutter to eat. Now in Goyla, in outside of Eretz Yisrael, when they did not know the day of when the Sanhedrin was Kiveh, when Rish Chodesh was, so they were machmer with this din because of Sveika de Yoma, and they asked this even on Yud Zayin Nissen, because Sveika de Yoma of Tezayin Nissen. So therefore, both days were Aser. Even today, that we know the Kviyas HaChodesh because we don't no longer Mekadesh Alpi Ariyah. We have a calendar, a Luach, and that's where all our calculations come from. So you know exactly when Tezai Nissen is. However, since for so many years, Klal Yisrael was keeping 2 days in these places, minig aviseinu v'yideinu, we continue this, and therefore outside of Eretz Yisrael, the wheat is only mutter after Yud Zayin Nisan passes by, and we hit the day of Yud Ches Nisan. Now, for the past few hundreds of years, people were not so makpid in Chodosh. The majority were not so makpid in Chodosh. The question is, why was that? Does the Olam hear me? Make a motion. Okay, good.
Yes.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem, very good. It says that Torah was not given to be expounded to the wood and to the stones. I feel like I'm speaking to a computer, to a daimim. Now, Lamaisa, the question is why people were not careful with this mitzvah. This is a mitzvah min haTorah. This is something very serious. One of the Tayyag Shasam Mrs. Loisa said is Loi Soichu Elechem Akoli Kamali Soichel Etamei Mazeh. So there were different types of limudei schus that were learned on Klal Yisrael for not being careful with this mitzvah. Now,
Can't hear you, Rabbi. Hello? Rabbi Lerner, you have to unmute yourself.
you hear me now?
Now we hear you.
Okay. So the Maisa is that Yesh Shalom Aleim Schus, that places that majority of the Tavua, the wheat was grown before Pesach. So, therefore, the crop of the next year didn't have to be careful about it because people were always using the old crop. In general, the way it worked, the system of in the grain world was that they were using the grain that was grown previously in the previous year. So it wasn't really a shaila of Chodosh. Or they would bring the grain from places where there was where the wheat was growing, where they were selling the wheat and selling it out at after Tazayin Nisan went by. Now, that would only help, and though that's only a limit schos for those places where most of the wheat was grown before Tezai Nisan, so it was all Yashon, there was no Shaila, it was Kemach Yashon. However, there were many places, like in Poland, where in Poland, they would use the grain to make from it beer, and that was a big drink there. It would grow after Pesach. It would be from grain grown after Pesach as well. They weren't being brought from other places, imports. It was from the local area in Poland, and they were grown after Pesach. So it was a serious shaila of Chodosh. There was no way out of it. Even in such a case, Poiskim learned a schus on them, a limud schus, because since it was a shasat chak, because their ikr drink was sheikher, was beer. You have to understand that we spoke, I think, a number of times before, that in Europe, it was difficult to procure wine in Russia, Poland, and these places because the climate did not grow grapes. It wasn't easy to grow grapes in warmer climates. So it was difficult for them to have wine, and the wine that was there was very expensive. So the Chamar HaMedina was sheikher. That was the Chamar HaMedina. That's what they made Kiddush on, and that's what they made Havdalah on. On Pesach, they would try hard to have wine. Even then, they'd usually end up making raisin wine, because raisins they were able to import and make raisin wine from the raisins. So, since they needed the sheikher, it was a very important drink in those countries. So if they were going to be machmer in Chodosh, they would miss out on this drink. They wouldn't be able, this is what they would drink every meal. So they would rely on the Rishonim. They're relying on some Rishonim where that's Yachid, but there are Rishonim which held that the Chodosh in Chutz La'aretz is only Midrabanan. And that really, Min HaTorah only applies to Eretz Yisrael. Midrabanan, it applies to places which are only next to Eretz Yisrael. Close to Eretz Yisrael, like Mitzrayim, Amin, Moav, and Bavel, those areas are close to Eretz Yisrael and can become confused with Eretz Yisrael. Over there, that Midrabanan is a Gezeda, but everywhere else, there's no Gezeda on Chodosh outside of Eretz Yisrael. So that takes care of Chutz La'aretz. So that's why they would drink the Sheikhar. Another schos that they learned on them was that even if we do hold that Chodosh, the Isur Chodosh applies in Chutz La'aretz, like the majority of places can hold, there's another limud schos that the Tevuah, the Isur Chodosh only applies to grain that was owned by a Yid when it was cut, but not that was owned by a Goy. So you're allowed to buy by a Goyish farmer. Wheat that was coming from a Goyish farmer was cut on his farm, there's no problem. However, based on this limud schos, you have to be careful. Those Jews that live not in the city, in the villages where they had fields, and they would have fields that they leased from the Paritz, from the Sar, who owned the area, and they had wheat that grew after Pesach, that it's a problem with Isur Chodosh. So we have all these different limud schosim. Number one, there are places that the majority of the grain which is grown, which is used, comes from after Tezaynisim, or it's imported from places that grow after Tezaynisim. Even places that don't have that, in the Chutz La'aretz, there's a sheet as a whole that doesn't apply in Chutz La'aretz. However, even if you say it does apply in Chutz La'aretz, some say that if during the time of the Ktsira, the reaping of the grain, the wheat, it was belonged to a Goy, there's no Shaila of Chodosh. Obviously in Eretz Yisrael, where you don't have one of the limud schosim, you have to be machmer. Now, l'mais in the Shulchan Aruch, it's paskin that a Baal Nefesh, the Bach brings down that a Baal Nefesh, someone who's a big Yiddish Shemayim, should not rely on these heterim, and he should be machmer for himself as much as possible, like most Rishonim and Achronim hold. The Chodosh is Min HaTorah, even in Chutz La'aretz, in all places, even in fields that belong to a Goy. That's the Ikar Shita. So L'maisa, although this is the Hanhag of a Baal Nefesh, however, the minig was, for hundreds and hundreds of years, that Klal Yisrael was not Makpid in this as a whole. Because of the different limudei schusim that we mentioned before, and different svaris and different shittas they can rely upon. And there were yichidim who obviously were on a higher level, and they were machmer. So the same thing today is really the same thing, but there has been a move by different groups in the last maybe 30 years or so, a big Kamach Yashan push.
I know Baron Soloveitchik, he has pushed it very much.
Very interesting.
The Chassidim didn't use it. I mean, Chodosh, Yashan, but he was around. He very much pushed Yashan.
Right. So I think that's a good point you bring up. There were a lot of Litvische Gedolim that, even though they themselves, I'm sure of that in Europe they were not necessarily makpid on this, where they grew up, and at least the people around them weren't. But they felt that in America it's easy and it's not as hard to mekayim this mitzvah, and therefore we should be more machmer with this inyan. And therefore there are different companies started to write, bakeries started to write on the Kamach Yashan, and there started to be hotlines about it and more awareness about Chodosh. And the Hasidic Olam more or less stuck to the way things were traditionally, and more like the traditionalists. And they said, this is the way it was, and they weren't running to look to change the way it is. So I think that's the way it stays till today. But again, this is the background of it. This is the general discussion of the issue, and that's what it is today. The Rebbe at one time, 40 years ago, the Rebbe of Hebrei one time said, you can go around Brooklyn and you won't find anyone who keeps this chumrah. I mean, there were, I'm sure, a few people were, but it wasn't as a kehilish thing. It was a private chumrah that people had. There were Hasidim who did keep it privately. There were people that were very, very big Yiddish Shemayim, very, very frum people that were machmer in every single din in Shulchan Aruch and every shita. So they were machmer in this for themselves. But as a whole, the kehillah as a whole was not careful about it, Misad Yisrael. But again, in Eretz Yisrael, it's different. In Eretz Yisrael, you don't have one of the major limudos chusim is that in Chutz La'aretz, this mitzvah doesn't apply. In Eretz Yisrael, it's not that way. So you have to be machmer in Eretz Yisrael. Another thing to point out over here, we see the koyach of a minik. There is klali hapsika achir am lahatis. You follow the roiv, but we find that the minik sometimes adopted a lenient or stringent approach based on adas yachid, based on a minority opinion. The oilam was noyig lahachmir or lahakil. And that became the minig of the oilam based on that, and that had a koyach. Now, the hachmer, machmer is not like the biggest kunst. It could always be machmer, but the hakil, the same thing we find in the kula. We do find that certain minhagim, they're based on adas yochid. They're based on certain shitas that you would say, this is not the ikar shita. But if something became a minig mekubal by Gedolei Yisrael and it was going on for hundreds of years by a lot of Klal Yisrael, it's an okay minig. It's not something which is considered wrong. It's a minig, and it's a minig of Klal Yisrael. However, a machmer tavel bracha, someone who is machmer tavel bracha, could always be machmer, but not to force people to be machmer, not to pressure people. So, we have a minig like we spoke last week about Svidas Oimer. The majority of the shitas hold that every night is a separate mitzvah, and even if you miss a night entirely, you can go on continuing with a bracha. That's what most Rishonim hold. But the Baal Halacha Stodos Bahag, his opinion is that you cannot continue counting if you missed a day, a full day. So the minig is like the Bahag. The Oilam follows the Bahag. If you look at the Rishonim, most Rishonim don't hold that way. When it comes down to the Shulchan Aruch, all the Noisei Klei Shulchan Aruch, the shita of the Bahag is accepted that we have to be machmer over there. It's l'chumra over here. We're talking about a l'kula, but we have to be machmer to. We should be machmer to the Bahag. That's a shita we should be machmer to. So it's an inyan that we know in Gemara says Hanach lahen leviim lebnei Yisrael shemloi neviim hey bnei neviim. Leave Klal Yisrael to their minig, because if they're not neviim themselves, they are b'nei neviim. They stem from neviim. So there is a certain level of a minor prophecy when Klal Yisrael as a whole takes on a certain minig, and we know that it's not a minig that's like the Chidah writes that minig can be read backwards also. If you read it backwards, it spells out the word Gehenim minig. He said a certain minhagim that they're wrong minhagim. They're inappropriate. People have minhagim that they're mekel lashon hara. It's not appropriate that we're mekel lashon hara. It doesn't bring us to the right places. So there are minhagim that certain people are not careful with tznius. That's not a real minig. As well as certain things, people think it's okay to do certain things, or it's okay to be machmer in certain situations you shouldn't be machmer in. So we have to know that not every minig, it's a minig which is accepted by an entire kehillah, and it's been accepted by Gedolei Yisrael throughout the generation. That has a status of a minig. People on their own can start their own minhagim. It's a nice thing. You want to do something with your family. It's a nice thing, but you can't pressure anyone and push anyone to keep it. So Ad Kan Benigeya, the Isser of Chodosh. Now, moving forward to now we're finding ourselves in the days of Omer, and we finished discussing the dinim of Svidus Omer. I thought it was Kedai we discussed the dinim and Menhagim, which are associated with Yemei Omer, the days of Svidus Omer. So we know the Gemara tells us that the story of the 24,000 Talmidim of Akiva that were nifter. There's a Gemara in Yevamis that were nifter in this time period. Now, interesting to note that the Rishonim already bring down, and Ibn Yeruchim brings that these days, Hasvidus Omer are Yemei Hadin. They're days of din. Meaning these days are essentially intrinsically associated with Gevura and with Din, and they're not days of Chesed. In reality, that's why this happened at this time. We know that the Talmidim of Akiva, what were they? What was their Aveda? They did not have enough covered one for another. We don't find in the Torah that that's an Aveda of Misa. That you're not chayiv misa for not being covered. No, you covered zalazah. It's a very bad thing, but it's not an aveda of misa. So there are a number of different ways of explaining what happened here. But one of the things is that number one, these days were days of Yemei Hadin. They were negative times intrinsically, so they're already prone to negative occurrences happening. The Rebbe has an interesting sikha. He points out that the number 24 is associated with Ayin Hara. Points out from another Gemara where 24 wagons went full of Talmidei Chacham and went to be Ma'aber de Chodosh, Ma'aber de Shana, and also they had a tragedy. Also, the Zohar says that there are 24 Bati Dinim of Gvura Lamaila. So the number 24 is not considered, it has a number associated with Ayin Hara, especially when the amount of Talmidim reached 24,000, such a tremendous amount. So it was definitely an issue of a very large Ayin Hara, coupled with the fact that Lo Nohagu Kavi Zebazeh. So all this played a role in this issue happening, but it wasn't the inyan itself of Leinogu Kavod Zebazeh, and maybe it wasn't the inyan of the 24 itself. It was a combination of a few factors which led to this being a very tragic time.
Rabbi.
Yes.
I heard and read that one of the major reasons why it happened was because the Hamon Am was seeing how they were relating to each other, and that became a big Chilul Hashem.
I hear. That's another pshat. Hey, that's taka big Chilul Hashem. When it's regular people, it's one thing. It's also wrong. But then when you have people who are supposed to be exemplary behavior and show the oilam how to behave, they themselves are not behaving appropriately. You have a tremendous Chilul Hashem. Correct. And if it's public, So it's a very, good point to bring up over here. We know B'chlal that the Eibishter is medactic with tzaddikim k'chut asayra. The Gemara is full of this discussions and many, many times that the tzaddik did something, seemingly what did he do already? But the Eibishter judges each person on his level. And the tzaddik's level, that's considered a big aveda. So for us, maybe it's not, but from that level, we know Moshe Rabbeinu was punished very harshly for hitting the rock. It's very hard to understand, that was what he's punished so harshly for. Let's leave it outside. So, Lamaisa, these things are hard to understand, but it says it's the Eibishter is medactic with tzaddikim kechut hasaida, and he by a hair's breadth, the Eibishter is medactic with them to keep to exactly what the halach, what the inyan is, the din is, or whatever the halach is. So Lamaisa, because of this time period of the Chavdal Talmidim, 1,000 Talmidim that were nifter, we have a certain level of Veilus. It's not a full level of Veilus, but a certain madreg of Veilus. So what are the minig associated with these times? We don't have any chasanis these times, and we don't cut our hair during this period of time. This may pose an issue for a lot of us who couldn't get a haircut before Pesach, and we're relying on before Pesach taking one during the ending of Adar, beginning of Nisan. And those that are machmer with the mini hagi sfira right after Pesach poses an issue. So Lamaisa, those two things are the minig. However, the minig is that you are allowed to make shidduchim, to make engagements. You're allowed, because how do you know you're going to be able to find another girl, or you're going to wait around not going to make an engagement? She'll get engaged to someone else. So you're also allowed to make an engagement party afterwards. However, you're not allowed to dance, have singing and dancing by the l'chaim, by the vart. Some say that a sudas mitzvah you're allowed to make with music by a sudas mitzvah, but it's not makubal that way, and it's not makubal to make singing and dancing by a sudas mitzvah either. Now, someone who did get married these days, we don't give him a knas. We have to understand, what does it mean giving him a knas? Kehilas Amol had the ability to give a knas, to someone give monetary penalties to people because they were given jurisdiction. The government gave jurisdiction over to the Jewish community, all religious communities that were, let's say the government was a Christian government. Because governments then were not democratic; they were associated with a religion. It was the government was religious. Anyone who had another religion, if it was a Christian country, so it was the Muslims and the Yidden, that they had their own jurisdiction, their own laws, because the government laws were based on Christianity. So they were allowed to judge for themselves and have their own batei dinim, and the government would enforce their batei dinim. So they were able to give knasim, they were able to give penalties. So says the Shulchan Aruch, if someone did get married these days, you don't give him a knas, because l'payil he did a mitzvah. But if someone cut his hair, you do give him a knas, because he didn't do a mitzvah by cutting his hair, and he was over on the minig. He was over on the minig, so you give him a knas because he went against the communal minig of not cutting the hair. So you see how important these minhagim were.
I heard the story about why did it happen in the Sfira that the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva passed away. Why Punkt the Sfira? And we don't take haircuts because of that.
Right.
Rizal said because between Pesach and Shavuos, the oiras come down. We went from Abdus to Chavis. It took us 49, 50 days to get the Torah from being an Eved to the oiras come down and it goes through the hair. So that's why it's not a coincidence that they passed away during the Sfira. Like this, we don't take haircuts. It goes, the Rizal doesn't talk about the beard. A beard is supposed to have cyphers. I talk about the hair. You don't cut your hair from Erev Pesach to Erev Shavuos. But not everybody in this.
Can I ask a question? How come there's no onus on Rabbi Akiva why he didn't teach his Talmidim, if they were considered to be his Talmidim? Why didn't he didn't get an onus that he didn't teach them correctly? He taught other things to them that they all followed him, but for some reason he couldn't understand that this issue. He wasn't. He didn't go down to the level of the Talmud to understand that that they're doing things incorrectly, or was he just so aloof that he didn't know that was going on?
I don't know. It's a good question. It's a good question. I don't know, but it could be that Rabbi Akiva tried very hard. You know, he taught them, but there was an issue with the Talmidim. Not always is the Rebbe able to control the Hasidim or the Talmidim. And unfortunately, you see that there are many times where a certain Rebbe, Rosh Yeshiva, very much wants his Talmidim to behave a certain way.
Look at us. We don't listen to what the Rebbe said completely either.
Right? So it's not it's not always up to the Rebbe. It's hard to blame everything on the leader. So, sometimes we could say that person should have spoken out and been more careful, but sometimes it's Pashat the Talmidim themselves,
Rabbi Akiva didn't have the most wonderful death.
Okay,
He may have had the onus at that point.
Yes.
Rabbi, minhag of ledin, no?
So, yeah, in many cases the minig the minig is like a din. Yeah, it has a different status, but yes, I'll tell you more. Minig has a status of can have a status of min haTorah, because minig becomes like a neder. When we say Ataras Adarim every year, Erev Rosh Hashanah, we add in any minig that we've done over 3 times. A good minig that we did over 3 times. You need Hataras Adarim if you want to stop it. If someone wants to stop doing a certain minig, he feels he doesn't have the koyach anymore to do it. Whatever the reason is, he can't continue this minig that he always did. He would have to make Hataras Adarim, meaning that the minig has a status of a neder that you took upon yourself to do something, which a neder is min haTorah. I want to tell you something interesting. I saw a tshuva a number of years ago. I saw a tshuva from the Dayan Weiss, or Minchas Yitzchak. The Minchas Yitzchak was a Rav. Originally, he was a Dayan in Manchester. A Chassidish Yid. There was a Dayan in Manchester, and he was a big Talmud Chacham. And he wrote shuvas called Minchas Yitzchak. Then he was appointed to run the Eidah HaCharedis in Yerushalayim. And he moved to Yerushalayim to take over the Eidah HaCharedis. And he was considered one of the big poskim of the generation. And parenthetically, the Satmar Rebbes have a big influence on the Eidah HaCharedis, even though the Eidah HaCharedis is independent, but they have a big connection. And the Rabbi Yoelish, the first Satmar Rebbe, he was the Nasi. He was sort of like the honorary Nasi of the Eidah HaCharedis. And he would always send support to the Eidah HaCharedis. They didn't take money from the government and different things. So the Minchas Yitzchak, his background was more of maybe like a Vizhnitzer background. He didn't have a background in the world of the Eidah HaCharedis or the Satmar world. He had no connection to that field. I think his sister was married to the Vizhnitzer Rebbe. So L'maisa, when he was appointed, they say that someone asked the Satmar Rebbe, Rabbi Yoelish, how could you appoint him? He's not a kanoi. He's not a zealot. To Minchas Yitzchak. So he said, a kanoi kemen werden über Nacht. A Talmud Chacham kemen nicht werden über Nacht. A Talmud Chacham, you can't, a kanoi, a zealot, he'll become a zealot. But the Talmud Chacham, you can't become a Talmud Chacham overnight. And he was a very big Talmud Chacham, Minchas Yitzchak. He has about, maybe 10 svarim of tshuvas, and very special yid. So Minchas Yitzchak has a tshuva where someone asked him a dinner, a yeshiva, a moisid was having a dinner during the days of Sfira, and they really wanted to play music by the dinner. How could you have a dinner without any music? It's pretty somber. And the Minchas Yitzchak, and they felt that it's very important. It's a tzarich mitzvah. L'maisa Minchas Yitzchak said this has a status of a neder. This is a neder that the Kehila Klal Yisrael took upon themselves. This minig, and this minig has a status of a neder. You don't have a right to stop doing this. You don't have a right to stop the minig of the Kehila to do such a thing, to make music. Live music we're talking about. We weren't talking about tapes and things like that, which is another discussion, but it was having actual live music at a simcha, at a dinner. So even though something starts off as a minig, but when one does it for a while, it has a gather of a neder. Now, Lamaisa, someone who never got married before, or didn't have Mekayim Pirvidivya, did not have a son and a daughter yet, or they are not able to take care of themselves, and they want to get married, they'll have a wife who will help them out in the house and take care of the things that they in the house. So they're allowed to get married min hadin. Because even in the shloishim, for when one's parents were nifter, Rahman al-Tzlan, one is allowed to get married for such situations. Just in the shiva now, but in the shloishim you're allowed. So for sure, the avelus of these days is not on the level of shloishim. Shloishim is something clearly in the Gemara. The minhagim esfidas soim are not mentioned in the Gemara. The Gemara tells us Talmidei Rabbi Akiva were nifter these days, but the minhagim esfidas soim are not mentioned in the Gemara. So if you're allowed to do it those days in shloishim, for sure you're allowed to do it during the days of Sfira, which are only a minig. Aval Maisa, the minig is machmer. Even so, the minig is that because these days are the days of Sfira, the oilam is very machmer. Sometimes you find people are machmer with a minig even more than in cases of halacha. So this is one of those cases where you find that avelo shloishim you're allowed. But the avelus of these days, even though the side of it, the foundation of it is a minig, but the oilam accepted the minig l'chumra over shloishim yom, even over shloishim. Now, if someone has a bris these days, they're allowed to the balei habris, the moyel, the sandik, and the father, the son, the day before the bris milah. They're allowed, before they go to shul the night for Ma'ariv, they're allowed to go and cut the hair so they can have a simcha when they look clean. The hair is cut. That they're allowed to do. Just want to mention to the Olam, I had Baruch Hashem a simcha by me. We had a baby girl yesterday.
Mazel tov.
Mazel tov.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem. Shekayach.
What's her name?
Sarah Nechama.
Oh.
Named after her great grandmother.
Oh.
I was thinking if it's going to be a bris, I was wondering what we're going to do.
Okay.
But now we're learning a halacha about a bris. It reminded me. So Lamaisa.
How do you still up? You're up from last night, probably, right?
No, Baruch Hashem, they don't let them in the hospital. They don't let them stay long in the hospital. So you have to go home 24 hours.
Kidding? She's back home already?
Yeah. You can't stay. So
she had a baby yesterday, and now it's.
Yeah. The baby was born 11 o'clock yesterday, and they were home already. 1 o'clock, they were home already.
Don't believe it. Wow.
Today, they took all the beds. This is in NYU in Manhattan. They took all the beds that to the other building where they were servicing for the people for the COVID. And so instead of having 50 beds in the unit, they only had 20 beds. Jeez. So if people they don't have enough beds, they need to move the ladies out so they can put more mothers in.
Wow.
So they have to move people out quicker. On the other hand, the mothers that are there they're much more spacious. The rooms usually have 2 beds. Now they're by themselves, and the room is very empty because they have a bed gone, so it's a spacious room. But it's only, you have to leave. And they also don't if you leave the hospital, they don't let the husband come back. In some hospitals, my sister-in-law had a baby 3 weeks ago in Methodist, and they only allowed her husband to stay just for the actual birth. Right after the birth, he was escorted out of the building.
Wow.
However, NYU was much more lenient. They said once you're there, you could stay until she goes home. But once you walk out of the building, you can't walk back in. So
it's Messiah's Nefesh to give a shiur tonight. I see it. Kol hakavod.
I had to go back for the kids, so I had to come back. But Lamaisa, actually, they told me I'm not going to be able to come up to pick up the baby. I'm not going to be able to come upstairs. I'm going to have to wait downstairs. But Lamaisa, when I came today, they told me that I could go up. So They're loosening the restrictions, it seems like. Now, Amen, Amen, Yeshakayach.
You should be a basta mit Chochem.
Amen.
Amen.
It's purpose for you to give a shiur tonight. Kol hakavod.
That's not the department.
Yeah, okay.
You can give him the shear in the hospital.
I would have to do it with a mask. Anyways, you know that I was thinking that the hospital was going to be like such a very strict atmosphere, but although everyone was wearing masks, they weren't wearing gloves there, but they had hand sanitizer like hospitals always have all over, and they were using it a lot. They weren't wearing gloves, but even the masks, like they said, if we're not in the room, you don't have to wear it. They were not so people were wearing it, but it wasn't like they were wearing the highest level masks also. They were wearing, most of them were wearing the cheap level masks that most of us wear. I thought they were going to be wearing the better quality ones. Yeah.
N95.
N95. Anyways, Lamaisa, getting back to the dinim over here, so we have the din when you have a bris milah, you could be makel to cut hair, take a haircut. Now, the old shaila is, when are these lamed gimel yamim? So Klal Yisrael is split with the minhagim in these days. When do we observe? It's not, even though it's between Pesach and Shavuos, we don't actually observe all the days. We observe 33 days. What are the 3 days, 33 days, and why are there different opinions about them? So Lamaisa, one opinion is that it was the first 33 days, and it concludes on Lag Ba'omer, and Lag Ba'omer is because Lag Ba'omer they stopped passing away. However, now, by the way, there's another shita that held that it was 32 days. So it wasn't a full 33 days, it was 32 days. And they didn't pass away on Lamed Gimel itself. And the difference would be, the nafkamina would be, if we say it's 33 days that they passed away, and they stopped passing away on Lag Ba'omer the 33rd day, it means that we really have to keep Avelos on Lag Ba'omer itself. So that means, how are we able to have a simchas on Lag Ba'omer, chasanas and music and everything cut to here? So the klal would be like this. When it comes to certain days, we're makel, especially by Avelos, the last day, we don't observe it as a full day. For example, by Shiva, we know people that are sitting Shiva do not observe a full 24-hour, 7-day period. The 7th day, they get up in the morning. And the rest of the day is no longer Shiva for them. Either on the 7th day, there's a klal in Torah, mixas hayoim kekule. If you had part of a day, it's enough, it's considered like you have the day. So if they observed Avelos, the night of the 7th night, and then the 7th morning, Shiva, and the 7th day in the morning, they sat down, they had Shachris, and they were Avelos, and they sat down afterwards, and then they got up. So they observed Avelos for 7 days, and on the 7th day, they also observed it, the night and a little bit of the day, so it's mixes hayim kekule, and we're makel, and they don't have to do a full 7 full days. So the same thing over here. Lag Ba'omer, even though Ina Chanami, that the Talmidim actually finished passing away on Lag Ba'omer, so the Avelos is still on Lag Ba'omer itself. However, mixes hayim kekule. So if the night, you keep Avelos, the night going into Lag Ba'omer, the night of Lag Ba'omer, and then in the morning a little bit, the rest of the day you're allowed to be b'simcha. It's not a problem. And that's the way you would keep the Lamed Gimel Yamim based on that opinion. However, some people have a minig where and we also have that minig, that already makel with Avelos the night before, like Boimer. People already make bonfires and they're dancing and singing and
Yeah, that's when it starts.
Right? They do it already at night, from nightfall. So a wedding is hard to make because it says like Kichavim is very late this time of the year. So to have a wedding start at 8:30 at night is not easy. So people don't have weddings the first night usually. A wedding you can have the second. You start early in the afternoon and you can have a chasana. So Lamaisa, but we're still maker with simchas and music and other things already the night before. So the reason what about Miksayim Kekuli? So the answer to this is that there's a shita which holds that 32 days, they were nifter for 32 days. The 33rd day is already after they were not nifter at all on the 33rd day. So that there's no need to observe Avelos on the 33rd day. I don't know, according to the Shita, why in the 30 on the 32nd itself, why we're not doing Miksayim Kekuli. I don't know, but it's a question I have. I'm not sure what it's based on. And
Rabbi, question.
The shaila is like this: if they hold that you're allowed to have a simcha on the night of Lag Boimer, so how come we can't have simcha already on the 32nd day itself? It's mixed Yom Kekule. If the night of the 32nd, the night of early Yom Lamed Beis, you were noyeg Avelos, and in the morning you were noyeg a little bit Avelos. Why can't the rest of the day of Lamed Beis be b'simcha? And it's not that way. We're Makpid that up until Shkia to Tzeisa Kichavim of Lag Boimer, we don't have any Avelos. So we have to understand why this is so. But Lamaisa, that's the minig. Another thing this plays a role is Tachnun. If we say that Avelos, the Talmid of Akiva actually passed away on Lag Boimer itself, they finished passing away. So you have to be noyeg Avelos on Lag Boimer itself. So Mincha, the night before, the day before Mincha, you still say Tachnun, because the night is not a Yom Tif. The night you still Avelos. We know the halacha is, the minig is that whenever you Mincha before Shabbos, before Yom Tov, before the Chodosh, you don't say Tachnun. After Chatzoi, Erev Shabbos, we say Shir HaMailis and benching. We don't say Tachnun anymore. Because the Yom Tov is coming up. However, by Lag Boimer, if we learn that Lag Boimer, the Avelos is still by night, and only by day you're allowed to have Simcha, so that the Mincha before, you have to say Tachnun. Our minig is that we stop saying Tachnun already from the day before. Which that shows you that we feel that the 32 days is only 32 days, and the 33rd by night is already Yom Tif. And therefore, by Mincha already, the day before, we don't say Tachnun. Now that's
probably
all.
What you say is a bit, because Rabbi said it's the power of Vishimon.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I'm thinking one thing that I have to look into it more. And there is a tshuva of many years ago I went through, and maybe he discusses it there. The tshuva, the Divrei Nehemiah, the Nehemiah Medebravna, who we one time mentioned that he was a Talmud of the Alter Rebbe, a very big Talmud Chacham. He wrote Shuvas Divrei Nehemiah. He also has notes on the Shas, which are published in the back of the Vilna edition. Lamaisa, he discusses all these shittas at length, all the reasons and svaras behind all the shittas. He organized it very well. And I have to take a look over there if he discusses it. It could be it has to do, there is a shitta of the Ramban, one of the Rishonim, which held that the Avelos, when we say Miksayim Kekuli, it applies even to the night before. Meaning by Shiva, the way our minig is that they have to observe the entire 7th night in Avelos and a little bit of the morning by Avelos. And then we say on the 7th day, Miksayim Kekuli. we don't say that when they reach the seventh night, and if they observe a little bit into the night, we don't say, mixes halayla kekulai, and you don't need to observe the rest of the day of Shiva. So just observe a little bit after, say Kechavim, and you're good to go. But there is a shita in the Rishonim, I think it's the Ramban, who held that way. That mixes halayla is kechol halayla. A little bit of the night is like the whole night. So therefore, you only need to observe Avelus in the beginning of the night, and Ba'etzim the whole night, you're already no longer Avelus. Maybe it's a way to explain it. It's difficult to understand, because in that case, maybe we should still say Tach from the Mincha before, because the night approaching, the beginning of the night, and the time when Mincha is being said, is still all time of Avelus. Because only until we get to the night and we observe a little bit of Avelus, we still have Avelus chiyuv on us, and only when we do it, then is mix alayla kekule. So I'm actually, we have to think about the svara. So once this svara basically is whether you hold 33 days of Avelus or 32 days of Avelus, it's all the same shita be'etzem, that the 33 days are the first 33 days. However, we know there are other shitas that hold that no, it's the last 33 days. In that sheet itself, you have two opinions. Some start on Rish Chodesh Iyar, and some start a little later. Some start on Beis Iyar, and some start on the first day of Rish Chodesh. And the chiluk would be whether or not the Shloish Yisimei Hagbala, the 3 days before Shavuos, need to be observed by Avelus. If we hold that it's something which is, if we start on the first day of Chodosh Iyar, so then you have an entire, your 33 days finishes 3 days before Shavuos. Shlosh Hagbala, you could already have Simcha. However, if you only start Beis Iyar, then you're going up, right up to Erev Shavuos. Now, many places in Ashkenaz, they only start after Rish Chodesh Iyar. But Lamaisa, a lot of Kehilas, especially Hasidic Kehilas, they keep they're machmer to both Chumras, and they keep all the days, besides for like Baimer, they keep from Pesach until Shavuos.
Rabbi, did Rabbi Akiva went to 24,000 Levayot?
I think he did Zoom. I don't know. I don't know what he did. That's a good question.
Aren't we already in Avelus? Aren't we already in Avelus?
We are having a terrible Avelus now.
Maybe he gave the same hesped to 24,000 times.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Too many people. Never.
You know, I just Messiahim, the time is running short, to Messiahim, that the famous beer from the Rebbe, Kedai to say it over again every year, that what's Pshat, when their Rebbe themselves was the one who extolled the concept of a Haftarecha Kamoicha. So if that was what Rabbi Akiva held was Zek Kla Godel HaTorah, how come was Dafke his Talmidim that couldn't follow through? So Lamaisa, the Rebbe explains that Dafke, because their Rebbe extolled the Haftarech Kamoicha, that's why they couldn't get along. Because they each felt that with the Avas Yisrael, they have to make sure that their other Chaver understands properly what he's learning, and he knows properly what their Rebbe holds. And they wanted to make sure that they're keeping the right din, the right halacha, and the right hashkafa. So because of that Avos Yisrael, if they didn't have Avos Yisrael, they wouldn't give a hoot. So you hold different. I take care. I need a snatch. It's salty. I take care of myself, and I know what I'm gonna. My Olam Haba, and I'm working on my own Olam Haba. I have my life, my private life. I see other people doing things. I look the other way, and that's it. I know what I'm doing. But the Talmidim of Akiva followed their Rebbe, and they had Avos Yisrael. They couldn't allow a situation where other Talmidim were doing the wrong thing, l'daitem, according to their thinking. And they felt they wanted to persuade each other to follow the other way. And Dafka that brought about the Lo Nogu Kavod Zeh B'Zeh. And Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was from the last 5 Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva that survived this terrible Magefa. He survived, and they remained. Shimon was considered the one that had the right balance and the right look. That even though he had the obviously soul of his Rebbe, but it didn't bring him to this state of Leinogu Kavod Zeh B'Zeh.
I thought that Rabbi Akiva became a Talmidim after they all passed away. He started all over again with these 5. That's what I remember learning.
Rabbi,
they were not. I don't have to look it up again. They definitely was Talmidim. Yeah. Yes.
We don't know any of the names of the 24,000. No. We don't know any of the names, so we were not left behind.
It's a very good question. It's a good question.
Paul, George, and Ringo.
It's a question. I mean, we definitely don't know all the 24. The question is if there are certain names which are mentioned in the Mishnah and Gemara, which does anyone point out that these people were ones that were nifter in the times of Rabbi Akiva? I don't know. It's a very good question. Maybe some people know. I don't. Maybe there are certain midrashim and things I don't know. It's a good question if there's some reference, but definitely we don't know. There's no list of all the 24. But the question is maybe there are certain names that are mentioned, and you know.
I see. Also, I had a question of halacha. Are you allowed to beautify your house during these days?
What do you mean beautify?
Like paint it, make extension in your house, paint it beautiful. You know, that type of thing.
It's probably a shiloh for. It's probably a shiloh for a rav. Such a thing.
And on the 9 days,
right?
You know, I guess like that. I want to know that these days are available in a way. So,
right. It's a good question. I have to take a look. It's definitely a shiloh which should be looked into before if one does any renovations or if one should be, you know, buying a new house now. I mean, if someone's going to lose the house, obviously he could buy the house, you know, but should one move into a new house this time period? Well, these are good questions. They have to be looked into, and it's definitely a shaila. It's not something she definitely should ask, and I would have to take a look to see if what the din is about that case. It's not mentioned. I don't think it's mentioned in the din in Shulchan Aruch over here, but it is mentioned in the din of Bein HaMetzarim. Another thing I want to point out is that people don't make, meaning is not to make a shechiyanu during this time. Because the reason being is because when you say the word shechiyanu on a beged chadash or pre chadash, you're saying shechiyanu v'kimanu v'kiyanu lizman hazeh. And you're thanking the Eibishter that he brought you to this time.
I'll bring you.
But l'maisa, this time is not a good time. So
would there be a heter if this thing just becomes over? Then we all go to Bes Menachem and we're so happy to say Shehayanu.
I don't know about this year, but
my shoes will be there.
You know, that it's interesting. People, you know, the issue of but if someone happens to be someone had a pidyon haben, or for example myself, which I had a baby girl. So the halach is when you have a baby girl, when you see the baby, you're supposed to say a shechiyanu. Like when you see the new fruit, you're supposed to make a shechiyanu, but you don't make the minig is we wait until you eat it. You actually have a no, because you don't really have a much of pleasure of seeing the new fruit. But when you have a chiyuv to make the bracha, you have to make the bracha. It's only that we shouldn't bring ourselves to situations where you should have to make the bracha. So not to go out and to buy something which is a pre-chadash and have to. But if someone had a pidyon event or had a girl or something else that there's a chiyuv to make a shechiyah, and they definitely have to make the chiyuv is not pushed off. You have to make the shechiyah. Just we don't go put ourselves into matzavim where you make shechiyanus And this is brought already, there's Makpid and Rishonim already for this idea of not making, it's not mentioned clearly in Shulchan Aruch. But there's Makpid for this minig that not to say Shechiyanu during this time. Except Shabbos would be different, making on Shabbos. If someone would want to wear a new kapota, a new talis, you could put on Shabbos. Well, so the Abish is a halfin. Everyone should have a full shlema, and parrots should have a full shlema.
Amen.
I got very nervous when I got the message, but I'm Baruch Hashem happy to see that he was on the video before. So you should have a full shlema kreva.
Amen. I'll send after the show. I'll send after the show to
I have to sing for the rabbi.
After the show, I sent to the basement a link that there's a rabbi speaking Hebrew. His name is Rabbi Ashkenazi from Kfar Chabad. And more than 20,000 people listen to the show. And basically, he was touching this nekuda that we spoke tonight. And he says, Shelo Nagu, I said it in short, Shelo Nagu kovod. They love each other so much, but they're missing the kovod. When a husband and a wife married, they love each other, but if they're missing the kovod, everything is destroyed. The point is the kovod. When somebody doesn't have a kovod for somebody else, it could be a different opinion than you. It's okay. But if you don't have a kovod for him, that's the zuv. That's what happened. And then he says, the Talmud from Rabbi Akiva, what his name was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, when he was sitting in the cave for 12 years, he came out with his son. What happened? They saw somebody walking with the field. They burned him. The bas kol came from Shemaim and said, go inside back to the cave. They stay another year. When they came out of 1 year, what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, let's talk only good things about Jewish people. And let's see what we could fix. Only doing good. So he had a covet for other people also. This quote that he had a covet with was stopped them and gave no from Rabbi Akiva with 24,000. And he explained, I'm saying it in short, but he explained, if it was a Magreifo, how could be only 24,000 students? How come no other people die, only this one? And he came out to come 700 people dying in one every day. When you have a student that in one shot 700 every day for 32 days, it makes no sense. Then they understood which the Nekuda. And I will explain Ben's question, how come Rabbi Akiva doesn't get punished and etc. But I'll send it after the show to the link and you could listen to it. It's in Hebrew, maybe it'll be hard for you, but it's like for half an hour, explain it much more.
Yeah, I want to point out an important nekuda that when people have avos, there's always room for different opinions. That's what we see from this Maisa, that they had the Talmidim and Akiva each one were allowed to have different opinions how they understood their Rebbe, and each Talmud was in his right to go and try.
What happened?
I don't know. He got disconnected.
I told you should have given it on in the hospital. All right, whatever.
I'm not in the hospital.
What?
I'm not in the hospital.
No, I understand. He was.
I want to say something. I want to ask something else. When the Rebbe said the Sikha, he did all that he could, and that it's up to us. So the Rebbe took on his responsibility instead of all the Chassidim. How come Rabbi Akiva didn't take on the responsibility of all his Talmidim?
He was teaching love, to love each other.
Right. So
Rabbi Akiva is somebody that his wife married him because he's a mensch. Right? She was a daughter from a rich man, and when she told her father, "I want to marry Rabbi Akiva," her father says, "Go out from my house. I'm not going to give you one penny. You're embarrassing me. You're getting married to the low life person that only a shepherd." But she said, "I don't see him as a shepherd. I see the goodness that he has."
But he was He didn't know how to learn. He didn't know anything.
He didn't know nothing. But the point is that she was looking at his midas. His midas, he was respect everybody. He would respect so much. Like a guy who was working for somebody for 3 years, and after 3 years, he told him, "I want to go home for Erev Yom Kippur to give the money to my family to this." And the guy said, "I'm sorry, I don't have money." He left and he went to his house. After Yom Tov, he came to his house with 3 wagons full with money, and he said, "Here is the payment." So he said, "Wow, I thought you told me you don't have anything." So he says, "No, I want to know what you're thinking when I told you I don't have any money to give you, and you know I'm a rich man and you work for me for 3 years. What you're thinking?" So the man says, "I was thinking in my head that you are tzaddik, that you decided to give donation everything you have to Beis HaMikdash. Therefore, now you have nothing to give me." So I figure, oh, Baruch Hashem, I work for somebody for 3 years, somebody who is such a tzaddik to give all his money to this. So he said, because of that, I'm giving you now 10 times more what I'm supposed to give it to you. So sometimes you judge somebody else and you respect somebody else, that itself is like, will bring the Geola. And by the way, I want to tell you, there was a Farbrengen from the Shluchim from Russia and all over the world. And there was over 20,000 people in this Farbrengen. It took about 8 hours from all over the world.
Wow.
And they came out to Achlote that Chabad now is going to be one. It's not going to be Mashiachistim or anti-Mashiachistim. We're all going to be one, and that's actually going to bring Mashiach. And let's daven and zecher. You should zecher to see it.
Amen.
Okay, so I'm going to work on the link to send it out. A good Nacht.
Okay, good Nacht.